Hello everyone, and today we are going to check out the N64 classic Goldeneye, and we're going to see how well it holds up today and whether or not you should pick it up, and also how you can find a copy. Now, Goldeneye was released in 1997 for the Nintendo 64. It was based on the 1995 movie, strangely enough titled Goldeneye. Okay, it starred Pierce Brosnan and Sean Bean. Sean Bean died twice in it, if you can believe that. Okay, the game Goldeneye was developed by Rare and published by Nintendo. Okay, Goldeneye was one of the first first-person shooter. It was the first ever FPS that Rare developed, and it was one of the first 3D games that the company had ever created. Certainly working with 3D worlds, it was one of their first foray into the world of 3D gaming. Goldeneye was released. It was the landmark for console shooters. It set the standard. Okay, most shooters on consoles at that point were basically inferior PC ports. You had games like Quake was ported to consoles, Doom was ported to consoles, etc. But very few of them were being developed with the console in mind. Goldeneye was one of the first to be developed. It was developed to take advantage of the new Nintendo 64 hardware. It came out in 1997. Of course, Goldeneye was 1995. The developers were given time to make it, and thus was one of the best movie-based games ever made, because the devs were given 2 years after the initial release of the movie to develop the game of it. Something which never happens these days. But then there you go, so it set the standard. It was designed to take advantage of the N64 hardware. It was designed to make best use of the N64 controller, which it did. It did make great use of that, and it was the best shooter experience on consoles, certainly at least until the original Halo came out. Well, of course, Goldeneye was released exclusively for the Nintendo 64, so if you own the Nintendo 64 cartridge and a still working Nintendo 64, you can just take the cartridge, pop it on in the machine, flick a switch, no need for updates or anything like that, and you can enjoy Goldeneye the way it was meant to be played. Now, there was an Xbox Live arcade version in development, but sadly it was cancelled due to licensing issues. Okay, Rare, who are now owned by Microsoft, okay, the James Bond license, which at the time was owned by Activision, I don't know if it's in the hands of now, to be honest with you, and of course Nintendo owned the original, the publishing rights to the original release of Goldeneye. Now that's quite a minefield, okay. Couldn't be navigated, which was a shame, because Goldeneye's successor, Perfect Dark, was excellent on Xbox Live Arcade. So, can you play Goldeneye on modern systems? Well, yes. Yes, you can. Of course, the Nintendo 64 is quite an easy system to emulate, so you can play it on a PC. There are various N64 emulators out there. In fact, the gameplay footage that you are looking at is the 1964 emulator with the Goldeneye Perfect Dark Enhancement Pack, which features a 1080p high-res, high-def texture pack and a 60 FPS output. It also features mouse and keyboard support, so the emulated version is actually one of the best looking and most playable versions of the game, because it plays like an old school PC shooter. It plays pretty similar to games of that age, games like Quake, Half-Life, etc. It plays fairly similar to them. You know, it's got the mouse and keyboard. We will talk about later on about the consequences of mouse and keyboard in this game, but yeah, if you want to play it old school PC shooter, then you know, you get the textures, you get the 60 FPS output. Certainly is an improvement over the original. So the emulator is a great way to play the single player, but what about the multiplayer offering? Okay, the multiplayer was of course added at the last minute. It was coded by one man, really, and it was just added in at the last minute. But it was the game's one of the game's most enduring features. Okay, you can play this on a modern system. You can play this on a PC. you can check out Goldeneye Source, which was a mod made with, you guessed it, Valve's Source engine. It is available for free. I will put a link in the description where you can download it. It's available for free as it's a mod. All that it requires is the Source SDK 2007 base engine. All you have to do is have that installed. You can get it for Steam, you can get it for free. You don't have to own a Valve game anymore. Used to be you had to own any of Valve's games to get this Source SDK, although you could have had Team Fortress 2 for free, but you can just install it now from Steam. Now, Goldeneye Source is a very accurate recreation of the maps. Certainly, a lot of the modes are all there. It features the entire classic Goldeneye maps. It's got some updated maps from the original. It's also got the casino from Casino Royale, which is called Casino Royale. There you go, see? It plays, you know, as you would expect from a Source engine shooter, but you're gonna get destroyed at it, okay? The player base is quite small, but it is fairly dedicated. You can also play with bots, and these bots are bloody ruthless. I mean, that's the footage that you're looking at now, is me playing with bots. I don't want to show you the online footage, it's just me getting shot in the back several times. But anyway, you can still play Goldeneye online. It has again, a very small, but they're quite dedicated player base. Still supported. It is version 5.0 as of the recording of this video. So there, you can check that out. Again, link will be in the description for that. Now, in 2010, Activision, who were the license holders of the Bond franchise, released GoldenEye 007 for the Wii, and a year later they released GoldenEye Reloaded for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. Okay, this was a remake rather than a remaster of the N64 one. It does share similarities with the N64 version, but it's far too different in its approach. It feels like a Call of Duty mod with some GoldenEye maps. There's a lot of changes to the level layout. Facility is totally different, for example. So is the dam level. It is just a modern shooter with, it feels like a mod that's been made. It feels like Call of Duty with some GoldenEye nostalgia sprinkled in to get you to buy it. A lot of changes to the characters. Daniel Craig replaces Pierce Brosnan as James Bond, and Sean Bean isn't in it. I mean, you can't have a GoldenEye without Sean Bean. He died twice, for God's sake, in GoldenEye, so you know you can't have a game without Sean Bean. So you want to buy it, do you? We should point out the emulated version is fairly easy to find. I'll put a link in the description to the 1964 emulator. There is a package that you can download that comes complete with everything you need to run it at 1080p, 60 FPS with mouse and keyboard support. The ROM, you can find that on your own. Fairly easy to find. Just go to your favorite ROM website and you can pick it up there. Now we'll move on to the proper realistic N64 cartridge. Okay, GoldenEye was the third best-selling game on the N64. It sold just over 8 million copies. If you're wondering what the first two were, it was Mario Kart 64 and Super Mario 64. No surprises there. Yes, GoldenEye outsold Ocarina of Time and Super Smash Bros. So there you go. GoldenEye was a big seller. Now this is good if you want to pick it up today because there are plenty of copies out there. Okay, typically an unboxed copy in the game, at least in the UK, goes for around £10 to £15. It's fairly easy to find. I looked at eBay and there's tons of them there. Okay, 10 to 15 unboxed is what you should be expected to pay for it. It's fairly cheap, fairly easy to find. Again, there's over 8 million copies out there, so there's plenty of them around. I did check around some local game shops. I did find a copy at my local CEX. It was unboxed at $14.99, so 10 to 15 is about reasonable. Now, boxed copies, usually around the £20 to £30 mark. Depends on the condition, depends on if it's complete with instructions and that, but generally it's not that expensive if you want the box. And I did find one sealed copy on eBay. It was £349 if you want it. You can't play it though, because as soon as you take it out of the box, you just wasted your money. So if you want one for your collection, there you go. So if you are a collector of N64 games, or if you're thinking of starting an N64 collection, then GoldenEye I would say is a must-buy. Okay, it's one of the flagship N64 games. The good news, because it sold so many copies, is it's fairly cheap and it's fairly easy to obtain these days. So if you want a copy of GoldenEye, you can of course pick up Reloaded. I picked mine up for £4 on PS3. It was in CEX. You can see how, you know, an unboxed copy of the original 10 to 15 and the fully boxed PS3 version was worth £4. The Wii version is slightly more rare and maybe worth about 14 to £18, I would say, if you want to pick that up. And of course, GoldenEye Source is available for free. Don't pay for that in any way, shape, or form. So anyway, if you want to buy it, fairly easy to obtain, at least for the N64. It's not one of those super rare games. Well, in a word, yes, it does still hold up today. It was fun to go back and check it out. I mean, this game is 20 years old this year. It was released in August of 1997. This is 2017. So 20 years almost after its initial release. The visuals on the original N64 version are horribly dated by today's standard, but I mean, I always found a weird sort of charm to the visuals. I love the faces in particular. They look awful by today's standards. It involved scanning an image of the person's face and then just putting it on the polygon model of the head, which looks really freaky when you see it nowadays. But a lot of N64 games used that approach, and it was the early days of 3D gaming, so you can kind of forgive it. I quite like the art style of it as well. The facility was an excellent level. Even going back and looking at it in the newer sort of modern game engines, I still like the original one though. I still think that looks pretty cool as well. I love the animations, the stupid animations, the stupid dodge roll, the comedy dodge roll that they did as well. But one of the massive things I loved about GoldenEye was the way it did difficulty, okay? If you increased the difficulty, not only did enemies hit you harder and they had more health, but the game added mission objectives as well whenever you increased the difficulty. So that gave the game quite a decent amount of replay value, as you could play through it on an easier difficulty. They did have 4 difficulty modes. They had Agent, Secret Agent, 00 Agent, and 007. So playing on the higher difficulties meant that you'd maybe have to take a sort of more stealthy approach, as enemies could swarm around you and kill you fairly quickly. As for the objectives, different as well. You had different objectives. You didn't just have one objective. You maybe had 1 or 2 objectives on the easy mode, whereas on the more 007 difficulty mode, it was way different than it was on Agent. So again, you could play through it on the easier difficulty and just find the story, or you could go in and play it at 007 difficulty, and it would be a really different experience. You had to take a different approach in each mission, as there would be sort of different parameters that you'd have to meet in order to pass the mission. The one thing I loved about the advanced features of GoldenEye was that it had location-based hit detection, meaning if you shot an enemy in the arm, he would hold his arm. If you shot them in the leg, they would comically hop around. You could also shoot them in the head, which was instant death, so it was one of the first games to feature headshots. If they had hats on, you could shoot their hat off. That was quite hilarious. Again, this was quite advanced. I mean, a lot of other shooters didn't do this at the time. GoldenEye also had things like the scoped sniper rifle, and you could zoom in with certain guns. Very similar to Call of Duty's aim down sight, although it wasn't aim down sight, but it was a precursor to that. So it did feature a lot of things that influenced a lot of modern shooters. That zoomable sniper rifle is one of the first things that is one of the first games to do that. And I love the location-based hit detection. If you look at the mission objective after each mission, it'll tell you the locations that you could shoot them. There was the head, there was the body, there was the limbs, and there was other, which was the nuts. You could shoot them in the nuts, and they would grab their nuts and fall down comically. That was hilarious. I mean, this was worked on in Perfect Dark. We could actually shoot the gun out of their hands. You couldn't shoot the gun out of their hands in GoldenEye though, but this did get a reworking, and so in Perfect Dark. So yeah, it definitely still holds up. It's still a fun game to go back and play today, and especially with the modern methods of playing it, still a cool game to play. So, if you haven't guessed already, Goldeneye, in my opinion, is one of the best games ever made. Not just one of the best N64 games ever made, but one of the greatest games of all time. You should definitely pick this up. It should be one of those games that should be on everyone's. If you have a gaming bucket list, this should be on it, really. I mean, its influence is still felt today. We discussed about things like the hit-based location, the aim down sight's influence. I mean, it helped create the juggernaut that is the FPS genre that we see today, particularly for consoles as well, because games like Doom, Quake, and Half-Life did the same kind of thing for PC. Goldeneye was like the proof of concept that console shooters could be viable. So, you know, in the way it's responsible for the explosion in console shooters, you know, that was the first game that proved that console shooters were good, because PC kind of dominated at the time in the 90s for shooters. Console shooters never got a look in until Goldeneye. So, which version should you pick up then? Which version should you buy if you want to get into it today? I would say the N64 original is the one to go for. If you want the authentic experience, it was the way it was designed, the way it was meant to be played, get the original. Now, if you're a modern gamer, then the emulator version is very, very good, okay? It is decent, okay? There is a problem with the mouse and keyboard, okay, as controls. It wasn't designed, and the game wasn't intended to be played that way. Thus, it's far too easy, okay? Enemies take too long to hit you. Even on the higher difficulties, they still take too long, okay, to hit you, because the mouse and keyboard obviously so fast. The N64 controller was a bit sluggish, a bit slow at the time, so enemies, they were kind of programmed to take a little while to react to you. So putting this in with mouse and keyboard just makes it far too easy, really. You got to play on the higher difficulties though, to get any sort of challenge. Add that to the fact that aiming, of course, is way easier with the mouse, and you're running at 60 FPS, as it didn't run at 60 FPS when it was released. Ran around 25 to 30 at the time, so you're running at double the frame rate it was at release. So you're gonna be you're gonna have a huge advantage over the enemies. The remakes, I honestly wouldn't recommend checking them out first, because they're just too different from the original. Again, they share more in common with Call of Duty. You want to play the old school version. The multiplayer experience is okay on console. If you've got 3 friends, you can have them around in split screen, 4-player split screen. If you can put up the hate with you get, as I always pick Odd Job, I used to always get hate for that, okay? Goldeneye Source is a decent alternative if you like being slaughtered by people who've been playing that for the last 12 years. Or if you like being humiliated by bots, then as I have, then it's worth checking out. Certainly it's available for free, but all in all, Goldeneye is a must buy, okay? If you take anything away from this video, buy Goldeneye, okay? Certainly pick it up. It's one of the greatest games of all time. Still holds up well to this day. There are various versions, but again, we recommend the original. Nothing beats the original, I think. The emulated version does have its issues being too easy. And of course the remakes are too similar to Call of Duty, and Goldeneye is good, but it still doesn't beat the original. Getting 3 friends around, back in the day when you had to have multiplayer with friends, you had to have friends for multiplayer, then it was cool. It was a cool game in 4-player split screen. It was awesome. So next time we're going to take a look at the successor, we'll say, to Goldeneye, not the sequel. But we're going to take a look at the successor, as of course EA got the Bond license after this, and did what EA did to games, essentially. Is they did produce a few decent ones, but they never really did anything good with the Bond license. Some good ones on the PS2 era kind of thing, but never really did anything. But we'll take a look at the successor to Goldeneye. We're going to take a look at Perfect Dark, sticking with the N64. We'll take a look at, of course, how you can buy it, where you can buy it, the different versions you can play. There's quite a few versions of Perfect Dark are out there and around that you can play on more modern systems. But anyway, that is all for this video. So thank you for joining me. We'll see you again soon, and goodbye.